All right, this is Chapter 5, The Peak of the Industry in 1982. The top year in the golden age of arcade video games can be tied squarely to 1982, both in regard to the sheer quantity of games being developed, produced, and sold, as well as to the public's excitement about this form of entertainment. In January 1982, Time magazine ran a cover story called Gronk Flash Zap, Video Games Are Blitzing the World, which was right on the money. Hundreds of companies were developing games, each looking to cash in on the fast-growing market. Players craved more and more new games. Operators jockeyed to get the latest hit games on location before the competition, knowing they would be the first to attract a big crowd and a coin box full of money. Games could be found everywhere, from dedicated arcades to restaurants and ice cream shops, from convenience stores, grocery stores, and drug stores to bars, bowling alleys, and malls. Anywhere there was a 3-foot by 5-foot spot could accommodate an arcade game. Even big retailers like Sears, Roebuck and Company opened arcades inside its large department stores. The year brought new gameplay, themes, and experiences, along with constant advancement in graphics and processor power, which were highly guarded trade secrets. Getting a game to market as fast as possible without the competition, finding out and stealing the idea became pivotal to success. Dig Dug. Dig Dug was created by powerhouse developer Namco, a Japanese game maker that had great success in the early 1980s, creating some of the most well-known games. Dig Dug featured a unique theme and gameplay different from any other game at the time. The player used a joystick to move the Dig Dug character to dig tunnels underground. Enemy monsters, pukas, and figures lived and cleared out pockets of dirt. The goal was to eliminate the monsters by quickly pressing a button to use an air pump that inflated and blew them up. Players also could drop rocks on top of them. A level was completed once all the monsters were destroyed. Dig Dug ends on level 256 because a bug causes a puka to be placed right on top of the player, killing him instantly. Following in the footsteps of Pac-Man, Dig Dug successfully appealed to men and women alike. Colorful cartoon graphics and quirky gameplay made this game a hit for Namco, selling more than 12,000 units. It remains a popular game, having been translated to every game system imaginable. A number of sequels have been attempted, but none has achieved the success of the original. Jungle King, aka Jungle Hunt. Jungle King was developed and distributed by Taito, which soon after the game's release was sued for copyright infringement by the estate of Edgar Rice Burroughs, owner of the Tarzan character. The game's main character is a bare-chested man who wears a loincloth, swings from vines, and does a Tarzan yell. Taito lost the lawsuit, subsequently changed the name of the game to Jungle Hunt, and re-released the game with the main character dressed as a jungle explorer who swung from ropes and didn't do the Tarzan yell. The game was unique and popular because of the variety of gameplay it featured, including a light but rewarding damsel in distress story, quote-unquote, told along the way. The gameplay was split into 4 sections, each with a different objective. In Section 1, the explorer needed to jump and swing from rope to rope while avoiding monkeys that wanted to knock him down. In Section 2, the explorer swam while avoiding crocodiles and grabbing air bubbles to gain oxygen. In Section 3, the explorer had to dodge and jump over boulders of various sizes that were rolling and bouncing toward him. In the final section, the explorer had to evade cannibals while attempting to save a woman from being lowered into a flaming cauldron. If successful, the player was rewarded with a cute intermission scene of a damsel saying "I love you" to her savior. The game also was unique because when players died, play would restart at the beginning of the current section they were in instead of having to go all the way back to the beginning like most games at the time. Milton Bradley released a board game based on Jungle Hunt in 1983. The first choice for the ostrich character in Joust was an eagle, but the designer believed the bird lacked graceful land mobility and thought that a flying ostrich was more believable than a running eagle. Joust. Hot on the success of Defender and Stargate, Williams launched a new team to develop games based on the same hardware. After proposing a couple of ideas for new games, the team settled on Joust, considered the most plausible match for the hardware's capabilities. John Newcomer led the team, and Bill Futz, quote-unquote, Futzenreuter, programmed the game. On paper, the idea sounded bizarre. Players would ride on flying ostriches while jousting and against enemies riding on vultures. Considering that ostriches can't fly and were not historically used in jousting, the game was, to put in mildly, an odd combination, but the team ended up executing an exquisite, perfectly tuned game. Player control was simple. A 2-way joystick chose the direction of movement, and a single button, when repeatedly tapped, would flap the ostrich's wings and allow them to fly. The player then jousted with enemies that appeared. The jouster with the highest jousting pole won the encounter. If the player cleared all the enemies, he would move on to the next wave. Occasionally, a bonus egg wave was awarded, quote unquote, during which players had a short time to collect eggs before they hatched into enemies. One of the best features of the game was the multiplayer aspect. Two players could play either cooperatively to complete waves together or competitively against each other to get the highest score. It was truly one of the first really fun multiplayer games, and in retrospect, Joust was a precursor to the modern-day multiplayer deathmatch style of gameplay. Joust was one of Williams' top-selling games, with 26,000 units produced. As with other popular Williams games, Joust was translated to just about every home game system available and still remains a fun and challenging game. A sequel, Joust 2, was released in 1985. Moon Patrol. Moon Patrol was developed by Irem, a lesser-known Japanese developer that had few hits in the 1980s like Kung Fu Master and R-Type. Moon Patrol was licensed to Williams for distribution in the United States. In this 1982 game, the player took the role of a Luna City police officer driving a patrol vehicle assigned to Sector 9, the home of the toughest thugs in the galaxy, quote unquote. Even though it is essentially a shooter, controls were a bit different than most games in this genre. The player used a two-way joystick to control the speed of a moon buggy, a single fire button that simultaneously shot missiles forward and straight up, and a jump button that allowed the buggy to leap into the air. The goal was for players to make it to the end of a level without getting hit by jumping over craters, rocks, and landmines while simultaneously shooting at rocks in front of an alien flying saucers above them. Aliens shot missiles at the player, who could dodge them by slowing down or speeding up. This dual threat from above and in front of the player made the game challenging, as the player had to watch two sections of the screen at the same time. Moon Patrol was one of the earliest side-scrolling shoot-'em-up games, which became a popular format. It also was one of the earliest arcade games to produce parallax scrolling, which featured multiple two-dimensional planes of images, mountains, and rocks layered on top of each other, but moving at different speeds. This aspect lent an illusion of depth to the scene, and is still usually used widely in games today. Game's unique controls, colorful graphics, and catchy background tune attracted players of all ages. Although Moon Patrol was not Williams' highest-selling game, it brought a fresh gameplay style that made it a fan favorite. Q*bert. Q*bert was developed, produced, and sold by D. Gottlieb and Company, which was owned at the time by Columbia Pictures. Coca-Cola acquired Columbia Pictures in 1982 and in 1983 transferred the assets of Gottlieb to a new subsidiary called Millstar Electronics. Q*bert was Gottlieb's fourth video game and the only one of the company's games to be considered both a commercial and critical success, selling around 25,000 units. The game's main character is a funny but endearing orange blob with legs, a big nose, and a lot of personality. Players use a joystick to move this character on a three-dimensional pyramid of cubes. The goal was to change the color of every cube in the pyramid by jumping on top of them while avoiding obstacles and enemies. The premise was simple and unique, but it was the personality of the main character that really won over players. Whenever the player was caught by an enemy or mistakenly jumped off the pyramid, synthesized speech would emit a gibberish sound likened to swearing, echoing the player's own sentiment without losing a character. When Q*bert fell off the pyramid, the player would hear a loud thwack. This sound actually was produced by a pinball knocker solenoid that created a rather loud physical sound inside the cabinet whenever the device was activated. The Q*bert character became something of a 1980s icon and was one of the most successfully merchandised games like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. It appeared on countless products, including lunchboxes, sleeping bags, board games, stuffed animals, frisbees, a tabletop mini arcade game, and even a full-size pinball machine. In 1983, an animated television series was produced as part of CBS's Saturday Supercade. Q*bert has become firmly entrenched in pop culture, referenced in various television shows, including Family Guy, Futurama, and The Simpsons. A sequel was made in 1983, Q*bert Cubes, but that game never came close to reaching the success of the original. Robotron 2084. Robotron 2084 was released by Williams Electronics, which once again enlisted the hit design team of Eugene Jarvis and Larry DeMar to create another remarkable game. Robotron is considered one of the most intense gaming experiences ever created. The object of the game was to save the last human family and kill anything or anyone who got in the way. The game featured a unique control scheme that used two joysticks, one to move the player's character and another to rapid fire a laser in any direction that's pointed. This allowed players to run in one direction while shooting in a different direction. The simple and elegant design allowed players a lot of freedom in how they played the game. Robotron is played in waves. During each wave, players had to destroy all the enemies, the Robotrons with the exception of indestructible Hulks, and rescue as many human family members as possible before being killed. The game featured 5 main enemies: Grunts, Spheroids, Quarks, Brains, and the Hulks. Each had a unique personality and attack pattern. What made this game so intense is that there literally could be more than 100 enemies all converging on the player trying to destroy him. Players had to keep moving and shooting in all directions in order to save the humans and survive. Robotron was a big success for Williams, selling 19,000 units. Its now classic gameplay has landed it on many top video game of all time lists and it often is touted as one of the best examples of gameplay design and execution. The game has crossed over into pop culture and been referenced in songs by the Beastie Boys and Lou Reed. It also has been translated to every imaginable game system. Zaxxon. Zaxxon was developed and sold by Sega. It was Sega's first big video arcade game hit, partly because of its eye-popping three-dimensional graphics. Zaxxon was the first arcade game to use an isometric view, which is a method of displaying an image that simulates a 3D view from a third-person viewpoint. This made it one of the most impressive-looking games of the time. In this popular game, players used a flight stick control to pilot an attack shuttle through the levels and a fire button to shoot missiles to destroy enemy fighters, surface-level fuel tanks, and gun replacements. An altimeter gauge helped players constantly monitor their altitude in order to skillfully navigate through wall openings under electronic barriers and to dodge rockets. The player's ship could be destroyed if it was hit by enemy fire or ran into brick walls or objects. It also was possible to run out of fuel and crash to the surface. Players needed to destroy enemy guns and ships while also shooting fuel tanks to gain more fuel to continue playing. There were 2 unique bases to play, and in later rounds, players could duel with the large evil enemy, the robot Zaxxon. In addition to its unique look, Zaxxon was one of the first games to feature shadows, and it was the first arcade game advertised on television. Zaxxon's popularity spawned a sequel named Super Zaxxon, a board game by Milton Bradley, and multiple tabletop versions from Bandia and Coleco. It also was translated to most game consoles and computers over the years, including Nintendo's Wii console. The game's success propelled Sega to become one of the largest players in the video game business. Tron. Tron, developed and released by Bally and Midway Games, was based on the Walt Disney Productions movie Tron, which was released at the same time. This was one of the most successful movie-licensed arcade games ever made. The cabinet had an incredible appearance. Black lights caused the translucent blue joystick and the fluorescent paint circuit lights to glow. In a darkened arcade, the effect was quite eerie and inviting and perfectly matched the look of the movie. The game featured a unique but intuitive control setup with a flight stick-like joystick with a trigger button and a separate spinner to control aiming in some of the games. Tron consisted of 4 sub-games inspired by the events in the film: Light Cycle, MCP, Master Control Program, Battle Tanks, and I/O, Input-Output. The 5th stage, a disc-throwing battle game, could not be completed in time and had to be left out. It later was made into a sequel called Discs of Tron. By 1982, industry competition was growing ever more fierce as manufacturers stripped to produce new, unique games that introduced trend-setting features, and as players sought the next hot new thing, the frenetic pace, however, could not be sustained. The Tron game was an integral part of the movie marketing campaign. In fact, the tagline of the promotional material was, "See the movie, play the game." Tron featured 12 levels of difficulty, and instead of just being designated by numbers, the levels were given names of programming languages: RPG, COBOL, BASIC, Fortran, Snowball, PL1, Pascal, Algol, Assembly, OS, JCL, and User. One of the last great vector games the technology featured in Star Wars was soon outpaced by the raster method.